Good morning, and welcome to Karma Stories. Wishing you a day full of peace, truth, and just enough karma to keep things interesting. Stay with us for real tales where justice always finds its way. The heat shimmered off the asphalt of Willow Crest's impeccably maintained cul-de-sac like a bad omen. I'd barely eased my '67 Mustang, a throaty, unapologetically American beast of gleaming chrome and faded glory, to a temporary halt beside the community green space when the radar went off. Not my DEA-issued radar, mind you, but the other kind. The Karandar. Moving sucks. Moving when you're federal witness number whatever the hell they'd assigned me. This week, under a new identity for the third time in 5 years. Sucks on a whole other level of existential dread. The Mustang, bless its gas-guzzling heart, was both my albatross and my anchor to a life I vaguely remembered. It was also, apparently, a declaration of war. She materialized from the beige-on-beige conformity of Unit 7B like a heat-seeking missile of petty grievances. Karen T. Whitman, the laminated badge pinned to her floral blouse, slightly askew, proclaimed her HOA president, though supreme overlord of all she surveyed would have been more accurate, if less printable. Her perm seemed to vibrate with indignation, and her eyes, narrowed into judgmental slits, were fixed on my car as if it had personally insulted her prize-winning petunias. "Excuse me?" she began, the words clipped, each syllable an ice pick. "That vehicle?" She said vehicle like it was a 4-letter word, possibly several strung together. "It cannot remain there. It's an affront to the community's aesthetic harmony." Aesthetic harmony? Right. In a neighborhood where every mailbox was the same government-issue gray, and every lawn was mowed to the precise millimeter dictated by subsection C, paragraph 4 of the Willowcrest Covenants, conditions and restrictions, a document I suspected Karen slept with under her pillow. I was just trying to get the damn U-Haul positioned without blocking Mrs. Henderson's thrice-daily poodle parade. "Temporary, ma'am," I said, trying for a placid, non-threatening tone. "Just unloading for the move." "Temporary has a time frame," she snapped, consulting an imaginary Rolex, "and that time frame is rapidly expiring. This is a common area, not a drag strip staging ground." My Mustang, which hadn't seen a drag strip since Nixon was in office the first time, rumbled softly, as if in protest. The first violation notice appeared tucked under my wiper blade less than an hour later, before the movers had even finished hauling my meager collection of worldly possessions, mostly books and bad memories, up the stairs. Improper parking of non-conforming vehicle. It cited Bylaw 7. 2. 3. Vehicles deemed unsightly or in a state of disrepair, subjective determination by the board, are prohibited from parking in common view for periods exceeding 1 hour. Subjective determination, I'll say. By the next morning, a second billet doux had joined the first. This one escalated to repeated violation. Unapproved automotive display. Warned of potential towing at owner's expense. Karen was clearly warming up. The trifecta arrived by sundown of the second day. This one was practically smoking, printed on angrier, slightly thicker paper. Final warning: immediate removal or impoundment. It included a grainy, zoomed-in photo of the Mustang's left front tire, as if it were the offending appendage of some metallic criminal. The subtext was clear: "I am Karen. Hear me roar. And your clunker is about to meet the big, greasy hook." Little did Hurricane Karen, with her ironclad certainty and her arsenal of HOA regulations, know a few key facts. Fact 1. That unsightly, non-conforming vehicle wasn't just a classic car. It was, shall we say, wired for sound, and video, and GPS, courtesy of the Drug Enforcement Administration. It was, in fact, a rather critical piece of rolling evidence in a sprawling federal money laundering case that made Willowcrest's squabbles over approved shades of beige look like kindergarten nap time. The bad guys we were after? They liked classic American muscle. Go figure. Fact 2. I wasn't just Mr. Smith, the quiet new guy in 9C with a questionable taste in automobiles. I was their star witness. The guy who'd seen too much, knew too much, and was now living life looking over his shoulder, waiting for the other shoe. Or a .45 slug to drop? The feds had me on a short leash, and this quiet, safe suburban enclave was supposed to be my latest hidey hole. Fact 3. And this was the kicker, Karen T. Whitman would hopefully never comprehend. My handlers at the DEA, bless their cynical hearts, had a little side bet going. They'd heard whispers about overzealous HOAs interfering with legitimate law enforcement activities in other jurisdictions, blocking surveillance vans, harassing undercover officers for unapproved landscaping a poorly concealed antenna array. Apparently, so, when they needed to plant me and the car somewhere the targets wouldn't expect, Willow Crest, with its notoriously militant HOA, became a perverse sort of two birds one stone situation. They were actively curious to see just how far an HOA Karen would go when faced with a seemingly immovable object like my Mustang, and a seemingly compliant new resident. I was, in effect, a human and automotive litmus test for bureaucratic overreach. My instructions were simple. Don't blow your cover. Don't escalate. Just observe. Let them show their hand. We need to know how these tin pot dictators operate when they think no one with actual authority is watching. So, I smiled vaguely whenever Karen marched past, her nostrils twitching at the sight of the Mustang, still stubbornly parked where I'd left it. I collected the violation notices like they were trading cards. Each one was dutifully scanned and emailed to my DEA contact, Agent Miller, who replied with things like, "She's a pistol." This one, "Keep 'em coming." The irony was richer than Jeff Bezos. Here I was, a man whose life was a tangled mess of high-stakes crime and federal protection, engaged in a silent proxy war with a suburban despot over parking etiquette. The feds were using me to gauge the operational PETA factor of HOAs. And Karen T. Whitman was unwittingly auditioning for the lead role in Suburban Tyranny, the miniseries, 48 Hours. Miller had chuckled over our encrypted line after I'd forwarded the third notice. She's efficient. I'll give her that. Any sign of the tow truck yet? Not yet, I said, peering through the blinds. The Mustang sat there, a silent, cherry-red sentinel, but I can feel her power levels rising. She's probably consulting her lawyers, or maybe just sharpening her claws. Good. Let her marinate in her own self-importance. This is valuable intel, Smith. Valuable intel. Valuable for them. Maybe for me. It was just another Tuesday in paradise, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Because Karen T. Whitman didn't strike me as the type to back down. And the DEA definitely wasn't going to let their multi-million-dollar, evidence-packed Mustang get towed by Bubba's 24-hour impound and bait shack. This, I mused, sardonically sipping my lukewarm coffee, was going to be more entertaining than I'd anticipated. Or a complete disaster. Probably both. The opening salvo had been fired. Now, we waited to see who would blink first in this ridiculous, high-stakes, low-brow standoff. My money was on Karen escalating. People like her always did. And that, apparently, was exactly what Uncle Sam was counting on. My money, it turned out, was well placed. Karen T. Whitman didn't just escalate, she went full rogue state. It was dawn. Day 3 of the great Mustang standoff. The air was still cool, carrying the scent of dew-kissed, Joey-approved fescue. I had a routine: wake up, make coffee strong enough to strip paint, and check on my 4-wheeled federal asset. I peered through the blinds of my rented townhome, and my stomach did a slow, sickening lurch. The space where the Mustang should have been, a defiant splash of cherry red against the oppressive beige, was empty, gone, vanished like a campaign promise. For a split second, I thought the feds had pulled it. Maybe a change of plans, a sudden extraction. But Miller would have called. He always called, usually at the most inconvenient times. With the cryptic brevity of a man who billed by the syllable, a cold wave washed over me. This wasn't the DEI. This was Karen. My encrypted burner phone was in my hand before the logical part of my brain fully rebooted. Miller. I barked. No pleasantries. The package is gone. Our package. Silence on the other end. Then, a string of curses that would have made a drill sergeant blush. What do you mean? Gone. Vanished. Poof. Not there. Did you guys move it? Negative. Smith. Stand by. I could hear frantic typing. The click-clack of a man whose day had just taken a sharp left turn into a minefield. More cursing. Then, signal's dead. Completely dark. We lost telemetry about 300 hours. Jesus, Christ. Smith, What the hell happened? 300 hours. While I was dreaming of simpler times, Karen's goons were apparently out playing grand theft auto with government property. She towed it. Miller, it has to be her. That HOA harpy finally did it. This is officially a level 1 disruption. Smith, Miller said, his voice tight with controlled fury. The entire operation is on hold. Everything. We're scrambling assets. Sit tight. Do not engage. Do you understand? Crystal, I said. Though the idea of sitting tight while my Mustang and a multi-million-dollar federal investigation was God knows where, in the clutches of a power-mad HOA president, made my skin crawl. The next few hours were a masterclass in bureaucratic panic. From my vantage point, it was like watching a hive of very angry, very well-armed bees that had just been kicked. Miller kept me on a short leash via intermittent, terse updates. They were pulling satellite imagery, checking traffic cams, leaning on local PD for any tow-ins matching the Mustang's description. Nothing. It was like the car had been swallowed by the earth. Then came the breakthrough. Not from a satellite, but from good old-fashioned digital snooping. While one DEA team was trying to ping their own disabled tracker, another had started a deep dive into Willow Crest's HOA, and specifically into one guarantee. What? You are not going to believe this, Miller said, his voice a mixture of disbelief and grim satisfaction. A day later, our girl Karen, she's got a hobby. Knitting commemorative tea cozies for bylaws she's violated. I ventured? Close. Turns out, this isn't her first rodeo with non-compliant vehicles. She has a documented history, going back years through 2 other HOAs she infested before Willow Crest. Specifically, a penchant for targeting classic cars. Muscle cars. Gets them towed. Hits the owners with exorbitant, escalating storage fees in some off-book impound. And when they can't pay her ransom, she somehow manages to get the titles transferred. She's running a goddamn chop shop referral service. Or worse, collecting them. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just petty tyranny. This was organized. Predatory grifting. And the car? I asked. That's the kicker. We cross-referenced property records. Whitman personally, through a Shell LLC, owns a dilapidated, supposedly abandoned property about 5 miles from you. Decrepit Victorian. Big garage. Fenced in. Neighbors reported seeing a flatbed tow truck heading that way around 3:30 a.m. the night the Mustang vanished. We're betting your ride is tucked away in that garage. A garage. That would explain the signal loss for the DEA tracker. Old construction, maybe lead lining, or just enough metal and concrete to form a makeshift Faraday cage. But here's where it gets really interesting. Smith, Miller continued, and I could almost hear him grinning. While digging into Willow Crest's infrastructure, trying to see if they had any security cams that might have caught the tow truck leaving your area, we found something else. Our Karen isn't just a car collector. She's a voyeur. You're losing me. Miller. The HOA, under her benevolent guidance, has installed a network of unauthorized surveillance cameras throughout Willow Crest. Not just at the entrance. Mind you, we're talking hidden cameras, some disguised as landscape lighting, others tucked into birdhouses, all strategically positioned to capture license plates. Let me guess, I said, a grim understanding dawning. To track vehicles not registered with Her Majesty's Motor Vehicle Department. Bingo. Any car that enters Willow Crest that isn't on her pre-approved list of resident vehicles gets flagged. She's built her own private, illegal DMV/Big Brother system. And get this, it's been operational for nearly 2 years. No city permits, no disclosures to residents, nothing. Completely off the books, just like her carnapping side hustle. I leaned back, stunned. This woman wasn't just a power-tripping busybody. She was a miniature J. Edgar Hoover in a floral blouse, running her own intelligence agency. Funded by HOA dues and illicit classic car seizures, the sheer audacity of it was almost impressive, if it wasn't so terrifyingly invasive. So, the good news, Miller said, is we know where the car likely is, and we now have a whole new avenue of inquiry into Miss Whitman's extracurricular activities. The bad news is, she might have found and disabled our primary tracker when they moved the car. If she found that, she might suspect the Mustang is more than just a pretty face. What about the HOA's own tracker? I suddenly remembered the prompt, Karen chong goi joten hapsen, gantiet bijink vihualengse. I hadn't seen anyone approach the car to attach anything. But if they did it in the dead of night before the tow. Did you guys pick up any other signals from the car? Anything non-standard? Miller paused. Now that you mention it, there was a faint, intermittent secondary ping. Our techs initially dismissed as interference when we were first trying to locate it. Low power, short range. They thought it might be a diagnostic signal from the car itself, but it wasn't a Ford signature. They're reanalyzing it now. If she tagged our car with her own tracker, Smith, this woman is a piece of work. The silent rebellion was about to get a lot louder. Karente, Whitman thought she was playing chess with a pawn. She had no idea she'd just kicked over the entire damn board and was now squarely in the sights of people who played for keeps. And my Mustang, the beautiful, troublesome beast, was right in the middle of it all. A silent witness to her escalating campaign of suburban spyware and grand theft auto. The question now was how to retrieve federal property and our primary witness mobile without tipping our hand about the larger investigation or letting Karen know just how badly she'd screwed up. This required finesse and probably a warrant big enough to drive a truck through. So, our little HOA queen isn't just a control freak with a surveillance fetish. Agent Miller's voice crackled over the burner phone a day later. He sounded like a man who'd had too much coffee and too little sleep, but with an undercurrent of that grim excitement cops get. When the case starts to smell really ripe. She's running a goddamn criminal enterprise in broad daylight, funded by Tupperware parties and bake sales. Metaphorically speaking, I was pacing my sparsely furnished living room, the one with the view of Mrs. Henderson's poodle performing its morning ablutions on what was technically HOA common property, but had been unofficially ceded to the canine. Don't leave me in suspense. Miller. What other skeletons are rattling in Karente? Whitman's meticulously organized closet. Get this, Miller said. The Mustang isn't an isolated incident. We've cross-referenced complaints, old police reports that went nowhere, and even dug into archived HOA minutes from her previous reigns of terror in other communities. Before your Cherry 67 became her obsession, Queen Karen and her board confiscated, and I use that term loosely, at least 5 other classic or high-value vehicles, all from elderly residents. My stomach tightened. There's a special place in hell for people who prey on seniors. On what grounds? The usual HOA bull. Vague crap like failure to meet community aesthetic standards. And/or the classic, parked in an unapproved manner for more than 48 hours. One poor bastard lost a pristine 57 Bel Air because a corner of its car cover had supposedly come adrift during a windy night, thereby constituting an eyesore. They're masters of the nitpick. Weaponizing bylaws written by petty tyrants for petty tyrants. And what happened to these cars? I asked, already guessing the answer. That's where it gets slick. These confiscated vehicles were then put up for internal HOA auction. And guess who the winning bidders usually were? Let me take a wild stab. Someone named Whitman, or a close associate. You're learning. Smith, top buyer, Karen's own brother-in-law, runs a used car dealership specializing in vintage rides just over the county line. Another frequent investor, a shadowy figure with loose ties to the HOA's current secretary. A guy whose name pops up in some interesting offshore account databases we're just starting to peek at. So, she seizes them on trumped-up charges, auctions them to her cronies for pennies on the dollar, and they flip them for a hefty profit. Precisely. And to make it all look legit-ish, the HOA established a Community Beautification and Maintenance Reserve Fund. Now that's where the pittance is from the sham auctions land. It's their slush fund. Smith, a way to wash the money while claiming it's all for new geraniums around the welcome sign. It was breathtaking in its sheer, unadulterated gall. A miniature cartel operating under the guise of suburban order. My Mustang wasn't just a trophy for Karen. It was inventory. The feds were now building a much bigger case than just money laundering for some distant drug lords. They had a juicy, homegrown RICO-style investigation blossoming right in the heart of Willow Crest. All thanks to Karen's inability to resist a classic car and a chance to flex her power. The next move from Camp Karen wasn't subtle. It was straight out of a bad TV movie. The doorbell rang around dusk. I wasn't expecting anyone. Miller's guys were strictly covert. And pizza delivery usually involved a complicated dead-drop arrangement that made me feel like I was in a Cold War spy thriller, which, ironically, I sort of was. I peered through the peephole. Standing on my welcome mat, the one that ironically read, "Come back with a warrant," was a uniformed police officer. Except something was off. His uniform was a little too crisp, the creases a little too perfect, like a Halloween costume ordered online. He had the mirrored sunglasses, the stern jaw, the vaguely threatening aura. I opened the door a crack, keeping the security chain engaged. "Can I help you?" "Officer." I let the question hang. He didn't offer a name. "We need to talk about your vehicle," he said, his voice flat, eyes hidden behind the shades. "The Mustang." "What about it?" My internal alarms were screaming. This wasn't local PD. Their cars were usually older, and their uniforms didn't look like they'd just come out of the package. "It's currently under investigation." He stated, "There are irregularities. It would be in your best interest to cooperate fully with the Homeowners Association regarding its removal and any outstanding fees. Cooperate with the HOA, not the police department." The HOA? Red flag number 1. His badge was a generic special enforcement star, not the city or county emblem I was familiar with. Red flag number 2. "Which department are you with?" "Officer," I asked, my tone deliberately mild. "That's not important right now." He deflected. "What's important is your compliance." "Actually, it is important." I pushed back, my hand inching towards my phone. "Because if this is an official police matter, I'd like to verify with your precinct." "Badge number?" "Please." He stiffened. The mirrored sunglasses reflected my own wary expression. "Look, pal, I'm trying to make this easy for you. Don't make it hard." "No, I insist," I said, raising my phone slightly. "I'm just going to call the non-emergency line at the Willow Crest PD and confirm who I'm speaking with. Standard procedure. You understand?" I started to dial. Very obviously, that was the magic word. Or rather, the magic action. He took a step back, his composure cracking just a little. "No need for that. Just think about what I said. Cooperate." And then he turned and walked away. Not strode, not marched, walked. A little too quickly, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He didn't get into a marked cruiser. He slipped into a nondescript sedan, parked down the street, and peeled out. My heart was hammering. I immediately called Miller. "He didn't touch you, did he?" Miller's voice was sharp. "All business?" "No, just verbal intimidation. Tried to spook me into playing ball with Karen over the Mustang. Wore a uniform. Bad badge. The whole 9 yards. Damn it." Miller swore. "We were afraid of this. Checked with our local PD liaison. No officer was dispatched to your address. Not today, not ever. Regarding your vehicle. We're running the plate of the sedan now." A pause. "Okay. Smith, this fits her MO. Remember that private security firm we flagged in her financials? The one that specialized in asset protection and dispute resolution?" "Yeah, they've got a history. Karen's hired them before. In other HOAs, they dress up their goons as cops, or process servers, or generic officials to scare residents who push back against her land grabs or vehicle seizures. It's textbook intimidation, designed to make people think they're up against legitimate law enforcement. So, Karen wasn't just a thief and a voyeur. She was employing fake cops to do her dirty work. The woman was an escalating one-person crime wave. The game had definitely changed. This wasn't just about some overzealous HOA president flexing her negligible authority anymore. This was conspiracy, fraud, intimidation with impersonation of an officer. "The good news," Smith, Miller said, a new edge to his voice, "is she's getting sloppy, brazen, and that means she's going to make more mistakes. We've got her house, the abandoned one with your Mustang in the garage, under surveillance. We're just waiting for the right moment. And the right warrant?" I looked out the window. The street was quiet again, the picture of suburban tranquility. But now, the shadows seemed a little deeper, the perfectly manicured lawns a little more menacing. Karen T. Whitman had upped the ante, and in doing so, she was tightening the net around herself. And I, her unwilling, Mustang-less neighbor, was right in the eye of her self-made storm. This was no longer just about my car. It was about dismantling her entire rotten little kingdom. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here. My call about the fake cop was, as Agent Miller later put it, the cherry on top of a rapidly melting sundae of probable cause. They had Karen's history, the likely location of my Mustang and its precious DEA cargo, her financial shenanigans, and now, witness testimony of her employing rent-a-thugs to impersonate law enforcement. The legal gears, lubricated by a healthy dose of righteous indignation from some fairly high-up places in the Justice Department, apparently. Messing with a federal witness and a multi-million-dollar investigation tends to ruffle feathers. Began to grind exceedingly fast. Showtime. Smith's. Miller's voice was almost gleeful when he called. It was just before midnight, less than 24 hours after my encounter with Officer Not So Friendly. We're going in. The warrant just came through. It's a thing of beauty. Covers the abandoned property, Karen's primary residence, and the HOA's main office, such as it is. We're hitting all three simultaneously. You want me to, what, bake cookies for the entry team? I asked, peering out my window. The night was still. Willow Crest asleep, blissfully unaware that the hammer of federal justice was about to descend. Negative. Stay put. Lock your door. Enjoy the fireworks from a distance. We'll retrieve the Mustang. If it's got a single new scratch on it, I'm adding vandalism of government property to her charge sheet personally. I didn't see the raid on the abandoned Victorian 5 miles away, but I didn't need to. About an hour later, a convoy of dark SUVs, unmarked but radiating an unmistakable aura of "don't mess with us," rolled silently down Willow Crest's main drag. They weren't going for speed or drama. They were a wave of methodical, implacable consequence. Several vehicles peeled off towards Karen's unit. Another contingent headed for the small, unassuming community clubhouse that served as the HOA's official headquarters and, apparently, Karen's data-hoarding dragon's lair. The lights stayed on in the clubhouse for hours. Men and women in windbreakers emblazoned with DEA in stark yellow letters moved in and out, carrying evidence boxes, computer towers, and what looked like servers. It was a quiet, ruthlessly efficient dismantling of Karen T. Whitman's reign. The next morning, Miller sounded like a kid on Christmas. You wouldn't believe the treasure trove, Smithy. That clubhouse wasn't just for Tupperware parties. It was her command center. We got everything. Surveillance logs, financial records, hard drives full of illicitly captured footage from those hidden cameras, and the Mustang, tucked away in that dusty garage. Just as we suspected. Our techs are going over it with a fine-tooth comb. Found her little HOA tracker piggybacked onto ours. By the way, amateur hour. The data analysis over the following days painted a picture far more damning than even I had imagined. Karen, along with a tight-knit cabal on the HOA board, including her brother-in-law, the car dealer, and the secretary with the interesting offshore connections, had been systematically profiling and targeting residents for years. Over 40 households were in their crosshairs, with a particular, almost fetishistic focus on anyone owning a classic car, a sports car, or anything that didn't scream suburban surrender. Her system was meticulous, Miller explained. License plate captures cross-referenced with DMV records they somehow accessed, still figuring that part out. They built dossiers, parking habits, guest patterns, everything. When they decided to acquire a vehicle, they'd manufacture a series of violations, document them with their own illegal cameras, and then pounce. The GPS data from the HOA's own trackers ironically now evidence against them. The meticulously logged towing company records the driver, facing federal charges, sang like a canary, and the tearful, angry testimonies from the elderly residents who'd been fleeced all lined up perfectly. They even found digital records of the sham internal auctions, complete with evidence that several gifted cars, vehicles ostensibly won by lucky residents in HOA raffles, had ended up in the possession of individuals with direct, provable ties to Karen and her inner circle. It was a closed-loop system of theft and corruption. The subsequent hearing was pure theater of the absurd. Karen T. Whitman, stripped of her HOA presidency the remaining Terrified board members had dissolved it faster than an Alka-Seltzer. Sat stone-faced, her perm looking slightly deflated. She'd traded her floral blouses for a severe gray suit. An attempt at courtroom gravitas that failed spectacularly. When confronted with the mountain of evidence, she didn't confess. She didn't show remorse. She denied everything. Her defense. It was a conspiracy? Naturally. This is a gross mischaracterization orchestrated by disgruntled elements and, frankly, the underground media, she declared, her voice quivering with self-righteous indignation. We were merely trying to uphold community standards, to protect our property values from these landscape-damaging vehicles, and individuals who refuse to respect our carefully curated aesthetic. The federal prosecutor, a woman with eyes like flint and a voice that could cut glass, just smiled thinly. Mr. Whitman, community standards do not typically involve illegal surveillance, impersonating law enforcement, running a classic car theft ring, or money laundering through a beautification fund. But perhaps you can explain this. And then came the coup de grace. The DEA hadn't just put a GPS tracker in my Mustang. As a high-value witness protection asset, the car was also kitted out with discrete audio recording capabilities. And Karen, in her infinite arrogance, had apparently held several incriminating conversations with her brother-in-law inside the Mustang, while it was stored in her creepy garage, presumably admiring her latest price or discussing its disposal. The courtroom listened in stunned silence as Karen's own voice filled the air, discussing prices, fabricating violation notices for a problematic Dix D9 Camaro, and laughing about how old Mr. Henderson never knew what hit him when we snagged his T-Bird. There was no explaining that away, no blaming underground media or aesthetic disruptors. It was the voice of a predator, caught red-handed by her own bluster and the silent, cherry-red witness she thought she'd conquered. The Willowcrest HOA collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. The feds were still untangling the full extent of the financial mess and identifying all the victims. But Karen T. Whitman and her key cronies were facing a raft of federal charges that would likely ensure their next community living arrangement would involve actual bars, not just metaphorical ones dictated by bylaws. As for me, my '67 Mustang was returned, a little dusty but otherwise unharmed. Miller even had it detailed. Consider it a thank you for your involuntary service in flushing out a particularly nasty rat. He'd said, the feds decided Willowcrest might be a little too hot for me, even with Karen out of the picture. So, it was another new town, another new identity. But as I drove the Mustang away from that monument to suburban dysfunction, its engine rumbling a defiant, joyful note, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes, the good guys win, and sometimes the biggest, baddest Karen on the block gets taken down not by a bigger bully, but by the quiet, persistent ticking of a clock, the meticulous collection of facts, and the undeniable truth captured by a classic car that just wanted to be left in peace. The rebellion against petty tyranny, it turned out, could be surprisingly effective, especially when it had the DEA on its side. Karen T. Whitman's carefully curated world didn't just crumble, it was federally condemned, bulldozed, and salted. The charges against her read like a criminal justice final exam. The U.S. Attorney's Office, clearly relishing the opportunity to make an example out of someone who'd so flagrantly abused their minor authority and, more importantly, interfered with a major federal investigation, threw the book at her, and then, for good measure, they threw the entire library. Count 1, obstruction of a criminal investigation for, stealing a DEA-bugged car. Count 2, tampering with a monitored federal asset. Turns out, Uncle Sam gets real touchy when you mess with his multi-million-dollar evidence. Count 3, conspiracy to operate an illegal surveillance network. Her homemade Big Brother system was now Exhibit A in her own prosecution. Count 4, wire fraud, related to the car theft and resale racket. Count 5, exploitation of a civilian office for personal gain. A catch-all for her years of turning HOA dues and bylaws into a personal piggy bank and fiefdom. Agent Miller laid it out for me, his voice tinged with the weary satisfaction of a job well done. She's looking at serious time. Smiths? The feds don't play patty cake when it comes to this level of sustained, organized criminal activity, especially when it crosses into our territory. As for the Willowcrest Homeowners Association itself, it ceased to exist with the bureaucratic equivalent of a silver bullet to the heart. The DEA officially delisted it from any and all forms of civilian cooperation. Not that they were cooperating much before, unless you count Karen's freelance intel gathering on her neighbors. More significantly, as part of a sweeping consent decree to avoid further federal entanglement, the HOA was effectively dissolved, its authority revoked, its bylaws rendered null and void. Willowcrest was, for the first time in decades, a free fire zone for unapproved mailbox colors and defiantly visible trash cans. The news rippled through the neighborhood like a shock wave. Those residents who had been Karen's loyal lieutenants, the ones who'd rubber-stamped her predatory policies, and perhaps even shared in the spoils of her internal auctions, suddenly found their property values plummeting in a different way. For sale signs sprouted faster than dandelions in an unkempt lawn, often accompanied by moving vans arriving and departing in the dead of night. The exodus was quiet, almost shamefaced. No grandstanding, no defiant last words. Just the scurry of rats deserting a sinking and now federally condemned ship. Good riddance. And the Mustang, my beautiful, beleaguered 67 was, as promised, returned to me without a single new scratch. The DEA techs had even given it a polish. It felt different now. Sitting behind the wheel, it wasn't just a car anymore. It was a veteran. A silent warrior that had gone into the belly of the suburban beast and come out the other side, not only intact, but as the instrument of a petty tyrant's undoing. It was a rolling testament to the fact that sometimes, even in the quiet, manicured conformity of places like Willowcrest, the little guy, or in this case, the guy who just happened to be driving a federally compromised classic, could still kick up some serious dust. I didn't stay in Willowcrest much longer. The feds, true to form, had another beige town lined up for my continued safety and anonymity. But before I left, I saw something that made me grin. A wide, genuine grin that reached all the way to my eyes. Right there, on the patch of common green beside the curb, where my Mustang had first ignited, Karen T. Whitman's righteous fury. Some new residents, emboldened, perhaps by the sudden absence of HOA stormtroopers, had erected a couple of small, neatly lettered signs. They weren't official, not by a long shot. They were pure, unadulterated, American folk art, born of shared experience and a healthy dose of sardonic humor. The first one read, "Notice, trespassing on federal assets is frowned upon." Karen thought she was above the law. She wasn't. And the second, my personal favorite, a masterpiece of concise, cautionary storytelling. Not every parked car is a residence. One wrong toe, and you can kiss your hoe goodbye. Forever. It was beautiful. A small, defiant monument to common sense, and a warning to any future would-be dictators of the cul-de-sac. The spirit of rebellion, once cowed by laminated badges and nonsensical bylaws, was alive and well in Willowcrest as I eased the Mustang onto the highway, leaving Willowcrest in my rear-view mirror, its V8 thrumming a low, contented growl. I thought about the sheer, mind-boggling absurdity of it all. A federal witness, a money-laundering sting, and it all came to a head because of an HOA president with an authority complex and a vendetta against cool cars. You couldn't make this stuff up. But it happened, and for once, the Karens of the world didn't win. They got slapped down, hard, by a system they fundamentally misunderstood and arrogantly underestimated. My Mustang, that glorious gas guzzler, was more than just a car. It was a symbol, a reminder that even in the most meticulously planned communities, freedom has a funny way of finding its horsepower. And sometimes, just sometimes, justice rides a cherry red 67. What did you think of today's story? If it made your day, drop a good in the comments. If it didn't hit the mark, just type 1. Got your own thoughts? I'd love to hear them below. And hey, don't forget to hit subscribe. It's free, and it really helps the channel grow. Thank you so much for being here.